Teen Wolf movie.
You have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Hey guys, let's talk about Teen Wolf. So, in case you missed out on the surprise, extremely minor hit that was my Teen Wolf video, and you haven't been alerted by Jeff Davis's many Instagram posts, the long-awaited reunion film Teen Wolf the Movie dropped on Paramount Plus on Thursday, January 26, 2023. And y'all, I'm not gonna beat around the bush here. It's bad. It's real bad. I'm usually not one to judge a film based solely on its Rotten Tomatoes score. I've seen Batman v Superman dozens of times, and I once wrote a whole essay defending the film adaptation of Cats. So let me just state plainly here that if this is your trash, I can respect that. Like, who am I, a grown adult who spent 10 months of his life working on a 5-hour dissection of the very show this film continues the story of, to deny you the simple pleasure of watching Shelley Hennig grab the hot cop's bare ass in glorious 1080p HD? In the wise words of Amy Adams,
I mean, I think if you're interested in a film, you should see it and form your own opinion rather than just going on the word of somebody.
I think the movie's great.
So with that, I encourage everyone watching this video to go watch this film and form your own opinions rather than basing them solely off of my own talking points that I bring up in this video. I guess by now you could call me a bit of a Teen Wolf expert. I've taken meticulous notes on every episode of the show and have now seen the film twice. Once again with notes. So while I really want you to support the show, the film, and the people that worked on them, I do feel prepared to crack open this film like a cadaver in a freshman anatomy class. I'm not gonna do the whole numbered list thing like I did with the show because I feel like all of my thoughts are sort of unified under the category of things I hate. In the spirit of the film, I guess you can consider this video to be the unofficial part 30 of my Teen Wolf video. We can get into the why of that in a bit here. Right away, I want to give a little context to this film. It was announced in September of 2021 as a kind of out-of-left-field play by Paramount to try and bring people over to their admittedly stacked streaming service. Seriously, what other platform has every episode of Star Trek on it? This is insane. Watching the film, you definitely get the vibe that Davis didn't actually start work on the script until the day of, or perhaps slightly before the announcement. The entire thing reads like he had some leftover ideas from season 6 that he never got to implement, and now he's the kid that gets a do-over on his presentation because he fucked it up the first time. Everything from the effective retconning of Scott and Malia's relationship and the new characters added in 6B to the clearly intended inclusion of Kira screams, "Teacher, may I please have another extension? I promise I'll get it right this time." Spoiler alert, he didn't. I say intended inclusion and not inclusion of Kira because, in case you weren't aware, several cast members from the original show declined to return for the film. Several of these absences, including those of fan favorites Dylan O'Brien and Cody Christian, were simply a result of this film's incredibly fast production coming into conflict with the now famous star's very busy schedules.
Tyler Posey again, or any one of my Teen Wolf castmates or any one of my Maze Runner castmates. One of the biggest part of those things ending is realizing you don't know when you're gonna work with these guys again. So, I would jump at the chance to, always.
So that was a fucking lie.
Kira's actress, Arden Cho, however, is a very different story. As the story, which I shared at the end of my Teen Wolf video goes, she was initially slated to return for the film after being unceremoniously axed between seasons 5 and 6. However, and this is according to Cho herself, she was apparently only offered half the salary of her white female co-stars. She understandably passed on the project, prompting Jeff to write out her character in the clumsiest way possible. In the film, Kira is never mentioned by name. Instead, her role is filled by a new character named Hikari, played by accomplished cosplayer and actress Amy Workman. So why is this a problem? Established characters have been written out and replaced by new ones when the original actor declines to return before. We saw this happen in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. Will Smith was unable to reprise his role as Deadshot from the previous film due to scheduling conflicts, which prompted the team to replace him with Idris Elba's Bloodsport, who ended up becoming a fan favorite. That went over pretty well, with only the minor speed bump here and there as scenes intended to be shared between Deadshot and Flag or Harley were rewritten with Bloodsport in mind. Why should this be any different? Well, I'll tell you why it's different. In The Suicide Squad, Gunn & Co. actually took the time to introduce Bloodsport, give us his backstory, and allow us the time and space to get to know who he was, independent of the character he was replacing. In Teen Wolf the movie, Hikari is introduced with quite literally zero explanation and is folded into the story with as little effort or explanation as possible, with only the element of her kitsune to distinguish her from Kira. Boom, she's fire type, she's a ramen chef, she and Liam have a thing going on. Now, I wonder what's going on in California. She's even shot and framed in the same way Kira was on the show, suggesting that even the director, Russell Mulcahy, had intended on shooting Arden and either didn't have the time or the desire to adjust any of his plans for Amy. I want to take a moment here and state plainly that in making this critique, I am not trying to imply that all Asian women characters are interchangeable, because that's not something I believe, and I would never want to even indirectly imply that. I'm simply trying to make it clear just how much this show and this team fails the people it should be working to celebrate. Workman was a virtual unknown before this film, and I would have really liked to see Jeff go out of his way to feature Hikari more prominently in the narrative. After all, the main conflict of this film is literally a continuation of the Nogitsune storyline from 3B, so the lack of even a kitsune secondary protagonist is really sorely felt. Instead, she's just sort of dropped in there with less ceremony than they gave Kira's exit in 5B. Apparently Cho has no regrets about passing on the project. I was already hashtag Team Arden once the story broke about why she wouldn't be returning, but after seeing the finished product, I'm pretty sure Jeff and Russell should be in jail. Speaking of, boys, hey boys, I think we need to have a little chat about something. Jeffy? Rusty? Hey Tai Tai? Have you seen Jeffy or Rusty anywhere? Oh, there you are. Sweetie, I was calling you for hours. Please don't tell me you were off making another one of your werewolf shows. That would be embarrassing. Now, Jeffy. Jeff. Daddy. Please explain to me why you insist on working with a man of this output. Come on, Rusty. You call this an oeuvre? Russell Mulcahy has worked on Teen Wolf ever since its first season. He got his start directing music videos in the 70s and 80s for artists like AC/DC and Duran Duran, and he even got to work with some big names like Elton John and Paul McCartney. In his videos, he became known for making use of certain innovative techniques, such as tracking shots and dynamic wind effects. Remember, this is a time before MTV and well before MTV's Teen Wolf. Music videos as an art form were in their infancy, and our boy Russell was one of their earliest innovators. He later gained mainstream attention for directing the Highlander films, which, while playing hopscotch with the line between genuinely awful and so bad they're good camp masterpieces, quickly attracted a cult following that essentially kept his career afloat as both films bombed at the box office. He then found broader success in the television industry, where he would ultimately go on to help create and direct 40 episodes of Teen Wolf with Jeff Davis. As one of the original creative minds behind the show, it's safe to say that much of Teen Wolf's most beloved qualities, its campy, self-aware tone and style, at least in part, came from Russell. However, there's a very clear and fundamental problem that's plagued the show ever since 3B turned out to be a surprise hit that earned the show genuine acclaim for basically the first time in its run. Ever since 3B, every season has tried to outdark the darkest season, upping the ante with new baddies in an attempt to recapture the magic of the Nogitsune. The consequence of this is that much of the camp and unserious YA tone that made the show such a joy to watch in its early seasons vanished, while Jeff and co. tried in vain to recapture lightning in a bottle. So here we have Jeff as the dog chasing the car, and poor 69-year-old Russell trying to keep up with an entire production on his back, as the two try and recapture the magic of a one-off fluke that was buoyed by the performance of one of the 3 actors that declined to return for the film. And this is the same car that they spent the last 3 seasons of their show chasing, with increasingly diminishing returns each season. And given that they're apparently still chasing that car that by now has clearly turned off on a side road and is not coming back, I'm left to conclude that in the intervening years since the show ended, not only have they learned nothing, they've deliberately kept themselves from learning anything in the hopes that if they can just get the finale right this time, they can be showered in the same acclaim and the same Teen Choice Awards that they were in 2014. But they're never gonna get that acclaim back because they fail to understand what made 3B so great. It wasn't that Jeff's writing writing was remarkably better than it was in past seasons. The quips were just as quippy, the dramatic one-liners were just as cheesy, and the direction for the season, while certainly a bright spark in the grand scheme of things, still drew on world cultures and mythologies in much the same way previous seasons had. Likewise, there was only so much done on Russell's end that was meaningfully different or improved from past seasons. The elements were elementing, and it was all working together in a great way, yes, but there was a key component that never managed to replicate itself in any of the team's later attempts, that being Dylan's performance as Void Styles. This may be a controversial take, but I honestly don't think Void Styles was all that remarkable from a writing perspective. While he acted sufficiently evil and his presence in the show worked to steer it away from YA supernatural romance and into straight-up horror, his motivations were often just as aimless and revenge-driven as his predecessors, lacking a larger end goal motivated by any real character work or backstory. That's not to say revenge is an insufficient motivating factor for a villainous character. However, it's also an easy thing for hacks to default to because it requires less exploration on both a micro and macro scale. We see this in action in Teen Wolf the movie, where the Nagitsune's motivations beyond his drive for revenge can be summed up in 3 words.
Strife!
3 words he repeats several times just to make sure we got the memo. And call me a snob or a pretentious douchebag or whatever, but I just don't think that living for the drama is enough of a motivation to build an entire screenplay's worth of conflict around. Like, why does he love drama? Well, because he does. And I know I've spoken out in support of the pure evil archetype before, so I should pause to clarify that, yes, I do love pure evil when it's done well. Pure evil villains are fun to watch because they're usually having a ton of fun doing what they do. So it doesn't really matter if they're super fleshed out and believable. Whether this works or not depends almost entirely on the actor portraying the villain. A truly great actor can take decent material and elevate it, turning it into something truly special. That's what Dylan did, and that's the key component that Jeff and Russell fail to understand. That's what keeps this iteration of the Nagitsune from hitting like he used to. Don't get me wrong, I love my boy Theo, but he's the closest the show ever came to replicating that key component that made the magic happen in the first place. And you know, what I'm saying is not new. People have been making these criticisms about Teen Wolf for years at this point. I made plenty of them in my Teen Wolf video. I'm harping on them now because I'm frustrated. As a longtime fan of the show, the actors, and yes, even the man himself, I'm frustrated that the script is still bad, that Russell's directing is still choppy and unfocused, that the dogs are still chasing the car and haven't come home yet. I'm realizing now that I'm like 8 pages into the script and I haven't even talked about the story yet beyond my aimless fan venting, so let's just get right into it. Teen Wolf the movie is set in the year 2026, 13 years after the show's conclusion. I have to assume that this big of a time jump was a response to one of the most common critiques of the show, that being the age disparity between the characters and the actors playing them. Good for you, Tyler Posey, finally getting to play a character your own age. The unintended consequence of this, of course, is that despite the pretty dramatic time jump, the characters only look marginally older than they did the last time we saw them, when they were in their late teens and early 20s in Derek's case. Question mark? Most of the actors have also had some form of cosmetic surgery paid by those sweet syndication checks. That's not a swipe, by the way. Literally every actor above the age of 30 has had cheek and lip fillers to keep them looking gorge as they recite lines that feel like they were written by an AI that was forced to watch 1,000 hours of Noah Baumbach movies.
Okay, you know what? If this is about the other thing, then let's talk about the other thing.
I don't want to talk to you about anything.
I wouldn't push it if it wasn't a thing, but we both know it's not just anything, and now it's definitely something.
You're giving me that look again.
What look?
The look.
What are you talking about? There's no look.
There's a look.
What look?
The conflict is instigated when a mysterious hooded figure accosts Hikari and Liam at the Japan-based ramen restaurant where they work as a chef and server, respectively. After the Nagitsune was captured at the end of 3B, Argent took it and Isaac to France, only to return without either of them the following season, and 15 years later, Liam has it, and is keeping it hidden in plain sight among a rack of herbs and things. It's actually kind of a genius strategy if you don't think about it too hard. Anyways, the guy gets the thing, and then opens the thing, releasing Old Nog out into the world once again to infect Argent and give Scott some PTSD flashbacks. Something I do like about this movie is that it takes the time to reintroduce us to each of the core remaining pack members and see what they've been up to in the intervening years. Scott's running a new animal clinic with Deaton in LA, Lydia's got a tech startup with a focus on renewable energy, and Malia's back in Beacon Hills working at Derek's auto shop. Even some of the absentees get name dropped.
Maybe you should be calling your son.
Trust me, right now Styles has his own fires to put out.
By the way, side note, you expect me to believe that Malia Tate, the girl that had a one-way ticket to a university in France in the beginning of 6B, would spend her 30s working as a mechanic in her hometown? Because, as it turns out, I do. It's actually an extremely in-character move for a person who spent her formative years as a coyote to cling to the one piece of normalcy she found in her adolescence and not want to let that go. Unfortunately, there's only so many guys in her hometown, which means that she spent the last however many years having a something-ationship with the Because the show was primarily a vehicle for Tumblr gift sets of emotional shipping moments, the film also takes its time to catch us up on each of these chickadees' relationship statuses, or as I like to call it, everyone is broken up with everyone all at once. Melissa and Argent, Mason and Corey, Scott and Malia, thank God. Even Stydia couldn't escape Jeff's decanonizing wrath. I'm sure if Dylan wasn't busy being successful, there would have been a true emotional reconciliation between Styles and Lydia, because the straights really need more wins. The only couple that managed to stand the test of time was Jackson and Ethan, and Ethan's not even in this movie. Yeah, that's another one for the straights, huh? They're up 2-0, so let's see if we can't even this up, huh, Jeff? I know I said the movie takes its time to reintroduce the main characters, so I should emphasize the word main in that statement. Every character who doesn't get a solo line for their actor's name in the opening credits gets completely steamrolled in the narrative. Characters literally show up without any explanation as to who they are or what they're about. We're just supposed to remember, or if you're a first-time viewer, I guess intuit who they are based on context clues. And given how fast the plot moves for how many moving pieces it has, you only get so many context clues. This is worsened by the fact that some scenes will just have a seemingly random clump of characters just sort of hanging out with no clear dynamic between them, and it starts to read like those fanfics that feel the need to include every character that's ever been so much as mentioned in the show in them. My favorite instance of this is when Peter, who was my favorite character on the show, by the by, just shows up out of nowhere with a blowtorch, completely unexplained as to how he got there or who invited him, only to burn some wolfsbane out of Derek and then stick around for the rest of the film, adding nothing. You know a film is overstuffed when I'm complaining about the inclusion of my favorite character. This isn't even limited to returning characters either. I already mentioned the absolute train derailment that was Hikari's introduction, but she doesn't even draw the shortest straw. Back when the film was starting to be marketed more and Jeff was posting BTS stuff on his Instagram pretty much every other day, a video dropped on the official Teen Wolf Instagram account introducing us, the audience, to the fresh faces that would be joining the cast for the movie. Among these were Workman as Hikari, Vince Mattis as Derek's son Eli, who I have very negative feelings about, but we'll get to that, and Nobi Nakanishi as Deputy Ishida, a new Kitsune character who appears in one scene and then dies. I have to imagine that Nakanishi's appearance in the cast announcement was either A, a legacy thing, as he'd previously appeared in a different role in 3B, or B, a victim of the seemingly extremely minor rewrites that took place following Arden's passing on the project. I can't help but feel like his character's sudden and immediate death, which occurs in order to boost the Nagitsune's power once he's exorcised from Argent, would have been less jarring had there been another previously established Kitsune present in the story as well. Instead, Ishida and Hikari are essentially on the same ground as characters who are introduced with little fanfare and then promptly steamrolled with little to say about either of them. It adds an almost disposable quality to the characters that should not be there, and it's incredibly evocative of the greater problems of laziness as Jeff takes shortcuts to get the story where he wants it to go. There are a lot of small examples of this shortcut taking. The first thing that tipped me off to this issue on my first watch was the scene where Scott is reintroduced to the audience. He's been called in by Deaton to aid the fire department in rescuing a little girl that's trapped under a collapsing building with her extremely protective pet dog. The dog has already bitten another attempted rescuer, so Scott's here to defuse the situation and get everyone out unscathed. Everything goes off without a hitch until, without any outside forces intruding on the scene, this random pipe snaps and the building starts falling apart again. Perhaps this would have been remedied if we'd even been told what had caused the building to collapse in the first place. What's that? An explosion in the boiler room destabilized the building's foundation? Got it, on board. Instead, we get no context, so this scene, combined with the extremely tight camera work that makes it really difficult for your mind to make sense of what's going on, seemingly comes out of nowhere and has zero tension or impact. And this is all within the first 5 minutes of the film. Believe me, it only gets worse from here. I mentioned earlier that this film feels like Jeff asked teacher Paramount for a do-over on his assignment because he dropped the ball with 6B, so it should come as no surprise that the events of this film would probably have worked way better if they were stretched out into a multi-episode arc, rather than being all crammed into one 2-hour experience. I'm not even asking for a full season order here. 4 episodes would do it. And by the way, I'm singling out Jeff here, not because I have some weird vendetta against the guy, or I want him to notice me or anything. I do want that though. But because he is the sole credited screenwriter for this film. Yeah, you're reading that right, teleplay. Just in case you needed more evidence that this film is closer to I Go to Japan than El Camino. Instead of that mini-series idea, in this 2-hour-long movie, in terms of competing storylines, we have Masked Man releasing Old Nog and lighting forest fires to, I guess, replenish the soil or something. Old Nog causing aimless chaos without a clear goal in mind. Allison being revived from the dead only to get manipulated into trying to kill Scott and his pack on behalf of the Nagitsune. Lydia struggling to deal with leaving Styles in order to protect him, Malia and Parrish's horrible relationship drama, and Derek's paltry attempt to raise his 15-year-old son Eli, who's just the worst. Add on to that Scott's return to his nothing sandwich of motivations that I was praying would be left behind in the new decade, and you'll understand why trying to keep track of this movie's story is like trying to corral a group of kindergartners only to find that one of them's found their dad's gun and has brought it to class for show and tell. The plot is so nonsense that there are several points when characters literally have to stop and explain what the plan is, sometimes to the very people holding them hostage.
We're heading back to the main road, aren't we? And my blood is going to lure them. I'm the bait for the trap, right? So by the time the others catch up to us, I'll be dead. And you can pick the others off one by one. Is that the plan?
Yeah, actually, that is the plan.
I knew the Nagitsune was too chaotic to play this game on his own. He needed me to help him win. All I had to do was give him my pain. And thanks to you and Scott McCall, I have plenty.
I'm serious. I'm gonna kill myself. Yo, I'm gonna kill myself.
Why you gotta be so dramatic?
And yeah, you heard that right. Allison comes back to life, and despite what the movie tries to make you think, this is not a Madeline Pryor situation. It's really her, and the ritual they use to bring her back is more loosely defined than the one Lydia performs for Peter back in season 2. We find out later that Old Nog over here was actually the one to plant the idea in Scott's head since he'd been possessing Chris at the time of the scene, but the whole scene is just like...
Whispering what? One word. Then only one. I hear it every time I go to sleep and every time I wake up, and I only wake up from nightmares.
What word?
What?
Bardo.
What are you... What? Are
we doing this?
Are you?
Or not?
What are you doing, Scott? You know, have these guys even watched their own show? Because I thought in Bardo...
Hold on, if there are different progressive states, then what's the last one?
Death. You die.
The scene after her revival where she tries to kill Derek is a bit funny though. Like, this is the scene they released online to hype up the movie? This clumsy ass, lazy ass, Mortal Kombat 9 in-engine fight scene looking ass scuffle was supposed to get us hyped to watch this film?
Oh, okay.
This isn't even as goofy as the fight scenes get. Check out this one with the Oni at one of the arson sites. Oh yeah, you duck and roll, Johnny Cage. Like, when Peter... Oh, and this fucking scene.
Come on!
Like, girl, Who pushed you? Anyways, that revival ritual is like low-key bullshit, but somehow it works and she's alive again. Yay! I guess coming up with an idea that made sense was too hard, and Jeffy Boy didn't want to spend more than a first pass on the script before sending it out to Paramount. You know how I said the glut of characters makes this film feel fanficky? Well, this also feels fanficky. Like, I feel like I've read 10 fanfics that all do exactly what this film does. Only with those, they don't have a major studio giving them $20 million in order to produce the damn thing. Speaking of things that feel fanficky, Derek's got a kid! And not just like a baby, or a toddler, or a first grader or something. Eli, Derek's horrible son, is 15 years old. 15! That means he was born around the same time Scott claims Allison died. That means he was 2 years old by the time the show concluded. So my question, of course, is this. Who is Eli's mother? We know he's Derek's son because he's a werewolf and that's a genetic thing. So where is the woman Derek had a child with? Is she dead? Did she die in childbirth, or was it more of an absentee mother thing? The only woman we know Derek to have been sleeping with around the time before Eli was born was Jennifer, and she didn't exactly look like she was in her third trimester when Peter slashed her throat out at the foot of the Nematon. And so the saga of mishandling Derek's basic character traits continues. I know I shouldn't take this movie seriously, but the writing and tone are practically begging me to. Literally, with their words, they are begging me to take this film seriously. I can tell that with this film, just like with the rest of the show's later seasons, Jeff and co were really trying to make something that was genuinely good, because 3B was genuinely good. And I don't believe in treating a work with kid gloves just because its creators are too inept to realize their own limitations. Not when the work has this kind of major studio support. This whole film feels like one big dichotomy. There are so many little things that add up to make it feel both like it drags and needed more time to flesh everything out. Likewise, because the film is so CGI heavy in its second half, the producers really have to stretch that $20 million budget in order to bring everything together, leading to scenes that look like this, and this, and yes, even this. It's like this film has two wolves inside of it. One wants to be filmed on location in Georgia with beautiful shots of the forests and marshlands that these fellas call home, and the other wants to be a big Marvel-style green screen action movie with lots of supernatural elements that have to be added in post-production. The body, meanwhile, has to find a happy medium. So while some outside shots look great, others look worse than stuff the show managed to accomplish 11 years ago. This movie has a lot of really bad and stupid reveals, such as the twist that the masked man is actually Mr. Harris, the mean chemistry teacher, and that he wants revenge on Scott and co for, I guess, allowing him to be sacrificed by the Duroc. A retcon that opens up so many questions and just weakens an old storyline in hindsight, as well as the reveal that Scott biting Old Nog with Kira in order to kill his mortal form, as instructed by Kira's mother, actually turned him into this weird half-werewolf, half-Nogitsune being, dare I say, a chimera. A twist that adds nothing and just drags the character even further and further into stupid territory, which is funny in hindsight considering that he was always the villain everyone pointed to as the reason why people should take the show seriously and not just shit on it for being shallow or vapid or whatever the discourse was on Tumblr back in 2014. Okay, so twists are out, stories out, characters are pretty much out. What else does this movie have going for it? The fight scenes, maybe? Well, unfortunately, because of the almost complete retention of the creative team, the action suffers from the same problems that it did in the show. Namely, none of the punches or kicks have any weight behind them, and the sound editing and camera work do not in any way complement the genuinely good fight choreo and stunt work. This was a problem in the show that I neglected to mention, since, if you couldn't tell by the runtime of that video, I had already spent several hours criticizing the show for its various ineptitudes, and didn't want to come off as being unnecessarily mean. There's also the fact that it was a show produced by MTV. It at least had more of an excuse for its lackluster fight scenes than this film that's in direct competition with other made-for-streaming pictures such as The Old Guard and, I don't know, right?
Yeah. No holes? Huh? Only the ones that I was born with. How are your holes? The fuck can you make a shootout awkward?
Okay, so the action scenes are out too. Oh, but what about the performances? Those were always pretty lock solid on the show, right? Well, yes, it's true that most of the performances by the veteran cast members are just as solid now, if not more so, than they were back in the day. Shelley's still quippy and blunt, Holland still slays the whole overwhelmed by the forces of the universe look that she gets whenever it's Banshee time, and Melissa is still top 10 TV moms for sure. However, in the same way that Jeff and Russell have stagnated since the show's ending, so too have some of their performances. I didn't have a good moment to talk about this in my Teen Wolf video. Yes, I know it was 5 hours long, whatever. But Ryan Kelly is really ungood as Deputy Parrish. I don't know what it is, I just get so uncomfortable whenever he tries to deliver any line with more emotional depth than a throwaway quip. There's this post-coital scene with him and Malia that's the first time we're really getting to sit with either character since the main show ended, and it's actually shot really tastefully, and Shelley's doing great as always. Meanwhile, Kelly's over here like, I think I'll channel the work I did for my community college production of Loose Ends. Even when he's trying to be a badass, it just comes off like he's trying too hard. Also, check out this sick bunny hop from the climax. It's in slow motion because the director really wanted us to appreciate it. In the grand tradition of hiring models for these roles instead of actors, Vince Mattis plays Eli Hale. I've been pretty rough on Eli so far, saying things like he's horrible and he sucks, and I just want you to know that when I say things like that, I really do mean it. I went back and forth on how much I wanted to pick on this kid's performance because he does seem to be, for all intents and purposes, a true newcomer to the world of film acting, at least in a role this beefy, and ultimately the little angel on my shoulder reassured me that seeing his performance in this film was probably torture enough for the kid. So I'm not gonna rag on him too hard here. All I'm gonna say is that he was really bad and I didn't like his performance at all. Eli's got a thing for stealing Stiles' Jeep, which left me wondering how they got the Jeep back from Dylan if they couldn't even get Dylan. There's this really ironic line at the end of the film where, in a surprise cameo, Tyler Posey's dad comes on screen to take Mr. Harris, who's alive for some reason, to crazy person jail. And he delivers this line.
Trust me, we've heard plenty of stories about teenage werewolves. There's always a new one.
A bold line considering that this movie, this franchise, has done nothing but repeat storylines that have already been done, only worse and with new, bad characters taking the spotlight away from the people we actually care about. And here we have Eli doing basically the same shit as Liam in season 4, only with Derek instead of Scott, but with, and I mean this quite literally, no reason for his existence. Watching the scene in the watershed, all I could think about was how much better it would have been if it had been Mason snooping on them instead of Eli. You know, because then you could have had him being dorky and geeking out over his friends being back. The guy has like 2 scenes in the film, so I would literally drop kick Mr. Paramount himself in order to get him a bit more screen time. I can't be all doom and gloom forever, however. I'm obviously someone who cares about this show a little bit too much, so of course there were destined to be some things that I liked. Crystal Reed is one of those things. I've always been a big fan of Crystal. Not like that. I love how understated her performance is here. Where pretty much everyone else is playing big, so much of her journey is internal. It's the same reason I've always loved Allison. The reason I'll defend her to the day I die in the arms of my first love, only to be reconstituted out of thin air, naked on the stump of a magical tree. That's not to say, however, that I liked her storyline. Her and Harris's inclusion here ruins one of the things I loved about the show, which is that, for the most part, death was final and was treated with the respect and gravitas it deserved. Now, it's no better than the fucking Vampire Diaries. That's not Crystal's fault, though, and for as mad as I am about the circumstances of her return, I do love Allison, and I'm always glad to see her on my screen. Colton is another one of my favorite things. He really feels like the only one that knows what movie he's in. Watching him jaunt around Scott's house uninvited and investigate crime scenes with Lydia is an absolute joy, if not just for how little he cares about everything that's going on. It almost makes up for the fact that he's got nothing to do other than satiate the fans with his presence. Actually, that's most of the characters present in this film, never mind. For as much crap as I gave Eli in the writing, I really do like Derek's attempts at forming a bond with his son. Hecklin plays a damn good TV dad. I have to assume at least part of the creative decision to give Derek a kid was inspired by his turn on Superman and Lois, and as a sucker for family drama, I felt more compelled by the scenes of Derek and Eli squabbling at home than almost anything else in this film. I do think it's a bit of a shame just how they decided to give Derek the axe. Spoiler alert, by the way, but Derek gets fucking smoked by the end of this film. And for what? Oh, the Nagitsune's too strong and he needs to hold it down while Parrish uses blast burn. And then everyone's there making out and celebrating their victory while his kid is just sitting there traumatized as his father's ashes rain down from the sky. Then they have his endgame ass memorial, and for some reason, they invite the coach? Like, they established earlier in the film that Derek and Coach Finstock don't know each other, so his presence at his funeral only further adds to the fanficky feel of the film as a whole. He's so prominently in frame, too. I don't know, man. If I was the coach, I'd feel a little out of place here. I'd probably just slip out during the eulogies. I do truly believe, as I do with the show that preceded it, that there is a good movie buried in this mess. It's just unfortunate that these bits of good are buried in a tired script, weak directing, and some CW level performances. After all this, it might sound like I hate this movie, and I don't. In fact, I want 7 more of these. I want an entire Teen Wolf the movie cinematic universe following these guys around as they retread the same tired ground. And I say that with only like 1 or 2 licks of irony. These are, for the most part, talented actors that deserve steady work, something that is extremely difficult to find in the entertainment industry. Not everyone can be Dylan O'Brien, right? Some folks just gotta eat. More than that though, while meeting this film at the level it wants you to makes it difficult to view it as anything other than a bitter disappointment, pulling the camera back and taking it all in as a whole, it reveals itself as something quite unique. Teen Wolf the movie is, in all affection, a masterpiece of incompetence. The product of an auteur so dedicated to the pursuit of mediocrity that it rises above all levels of sincerity, irony, and even camp to become something deeply unspecial. The perfect continuation to the perfect storm of wit, ineptitude, and tacky earnestness. And hear me when I say that that is something to be cherished. That's the end of my script. I don't have an outro. I was kind of planning on just cutting it off there, but now sitting here, I feel like that would be kind of an awkward place to just let the video end, right? So instead, what I think I should actually do is talk about some upcoming projects that I have planned for this channel. Got another video that I'm editing right now alongside this one. It's more of an unscripted video, kind of a read-along of a of a certain property that has been in the news recently. I have expressed my love for on this channel quite in depth before, so we'll be doing that. And then beyond that, I have a couple of more long boys in the work. And by in the works, I do mean that I am in the early stages of scripting one of them, and in the early stages of binging the thing I'm gonna talk about for the other. So those are probably gonna be in development for a while. Those take a hell of a long time to produce, but now that I have a nicer computer, I can work on videos concurrently rather than consecutively like I had to with the Teen Wolf video and the Degrassi video and so on and so forth. I have a bunch of shorter video ideas that I also want to do, but I don't want all of my content on my channel to be sort of, I guess, shorter form 20-minute, 30-minute videos, because I really am passionate about the longer form content that is most of what I watch on YouTube anyways. It's just that right now I'm in my last semester at school, and so I just have a bunch of ducks that I need to keep in a row, right? And sometimes priorities get pushed around, and we got to do what we got to do. As for more proper, you know, academic video essays, whatever. Sort of in the same vein as my Walking Dead video, I have a bunch of ideas, 2 outlines, and nothing written, right? So I might, you know, as the months go by, start focusing some more time on that if I want to get into the more academic sides of things. But given that I'm already sort of in the thick of the academic side of things right now in my personal life, that might be a little while. But like I said, I have plenty of ideas. I have a huge passion for video essays of that caliber. And a big part of this channel that's been exciting for me is sort of having a fertile testing ground for different ideas and seeing what I like to do and seeing what you guys respond to. Thank you for all the love on the Teen Wolf video that just passed 50,000 views. It's insane to think about. I have said this before, but it's true that I genuinely never thought anyone would give a fuck about any of my videos or my channel. So I really appreciate the support, and I'm really looking forward to the stuff that we're going to do and to talk about in the coming, you know, however long this goes on. I don't have an end in sight. This is something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and the fact that or finally starting to pick up some traction. It's just crazy to me. It's just absolutely crazy. So yeah, with that, thank you for watching. Subscribe, and if you don't, I'll know, and I'll find you. Good night.